I am on a quest to beat every game for the Nintendo Gamecube. Every single one. However, each game is chosen at random by this horrendous wheel, so we are never certain what's coming next. My name is Rami, and this is my quest to beat the entire Gamecube library. Game number 4 is a big one. Killer7. Released globally in 2005, it was developed by Grasshopper Manufacture and published by Capcom. Some of you may know about Grasshopper and its founder, Goichi Suda, better known as Suda51. They are known for making extremely quirky titles like No More Heroes and Lollipop Chainsaw. Coming into this one, I was excited. I've never played Killer7 and I knew nothing about the gameplay, but I've really enjoyed Suda games in the past. I had to think really carefully about how I was going to present this one, since the story is totally nuts and purposefully obtuse. As such, there is a lot open to interpretation, and most of the gameplay is left to player discovery and trial and error. I know this video ended up extremely long. This is honestly one of the most complicated games we'll play in the entire challenge from both a narrative and gameplay perspective, so I hope you enjoy it, and we'll be doing much shorter videos for the upcoming games. With that preamble finished, it's time to get stuck in. The only mode on offer is the story, so to beat this one, we need to finish all chapters. The game does have 2 difficulties, normal and deadly. Normal is the default setting, so that's what I'll be playing on. Every chapter starts by showing us a silhouette of our target and the chapter name. We're going to start with the prologue chapter, Angel. We're introduced to the first of the Killer7, Garcian Smith. We get very little information besides being told that the enemy we're fighting is different, and there are 14 of them. We're then told our objective, destroy the Heaven Smile headquarters and capture their chief alive. I spent some time learning the controls, and this is where the game demonstrated just how unique it is. You're essentially on rails for the entire game. Your character can only move forwards and backwards along fixed paths. You can't backpedal, you can only turn around. You can also only wield your weapon while standing still, and if you begin to aim, there is some startup and ending lag based on which character you're using. This might sound clunky, but having finished the game, I can say I love it. I've never played anything else like this, and while the movement can feel stifling at times, that's part of the charm. Decisions like when to move, turn, aim, and shoot all really stack up in this game, and one bad choice can get you in hot water. The enemies are always initially invisible and cannot be hurt. You usually can tell when they're around though, there's various sound effects. To make them visible and vulnerable, you're going to have to use the scan. This only affects enemies in your field of vision. The last thing to mention for now is directional choices. As you progress through levels on the rail system, you are constantly offered divergent paths to follow. When you reach a junction, you tilt the stick in the direction you want to take. And that's it. With the basic controls out of the way, we're thrust into our first level, and we need to figure the rest out on our own. We gain control of Garcian, but after just a few seconds, he transforms into a different character. This is our second member of the Killer7. This time, he's called Dan Smith. We're then immediately introduced to another new character, Iwazaru. He has an interesting fashion sense, and he talks like this. He's more or less our hint system for the game. If we're ever unsure what to do, he might drop a vague hint or a little bit of lore our way. The game is deliberately obtuse, like it's a stylistic thing. That's what Suda games are like. So I don't know what's happening, you don't know what's happening, more than show, we're just gonna figure it out. I initially wasn't sure how to convey this game. It explains very little, and a lot of events only make sense with hindsight, but I figure you guys should just learn things as they happen and as I learned them. Next, I entered a room called Harmon's room. We'll talk more about Harmon later. Inside, we have a maid called Samantha. She lets us save our progress. Then there's also a TV that lets us change to the other members of the Killer7. Lastly, in the back of the room, Iwazaru will explain various details about lore and mechanics. Since I was streaming this live, I didn't want to spend 20 minutes reading through everything, but we're told that not only are the Killer7 multiple personalities, they each have their own body as well. Not confusing. Once we proceed with the mission, Iwazaru informs us that the Heaven Smile contain bombs in their body, and they mainly attack by rushing at you. So regardless of which Heaven Smile we are fighting, our main focus is to reveal them through scanning and dispatch them with our gun before they can get in range to explode. One of the paths is now blocked by this funky lad called Travis. He tells us that our chief killed him in the past, and he is essentially a spirit that, similar to Iwazaru, will drop in and occasionally offer tidbits of lore. I know this was a lot to take in, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, that it felt pretty overwhelming for me in the first 5 minutes of gameplay. I can say though, with hindsight, it gradually starts to make more sense. Well, some sense anyway. It's now time for our first named enemy. These are special Heaven Smiles that have unique mechanics and are much more threatening than the standard ones. This Camellia Smile is essentially a nest that constantly cranks out enemies. They roll towards you, and if you let them get too close, they'll explode. So it's a juggling act between keeping the roly boys at bay and shooting this glowing yellow weak spot on the nest. At the time, I was still figuring out the game and I was not entirely sure what I was supposed to be doing, so this happened on our first attempt. Alright, am I dead? I think I'm dead. So Dan is dead. We respawn in Harmon's room and need to pick a different member of the Seven to continue. Since I'd already seen Garcian, I decided to take him out for a spin. Once I got back to where Dan died, I found this outline and bag on the floor. As it turns out, when a character dies, you need to return to where they were killed as Garcian and he'll retrieve their head. This will take you back to Harmon's room and then they can be revived. Each member of the Killer7 has their own mechanics and fighting style. I'm just going to run through each one of them as we get there. Garcian is easily the weakest member. His only real purpose is to revive the others. Combat-wise, he has a Sig Sauer and is extremely underwhelming damage-wise. It does at least have a super fast reload speed though. Unlike the other characters, if you die as Garcian, that's game over. You will be returned to your last hard save point. I know this because that's exactly what happened to me, and since I hadn't saved yet, I needed to start the whole game over again. This time though, I had a much better sense of what was happening, so I stuck with Dan and we booked it back to the Camellia fight. Dan Smith uses a Colt revolver, and it's essentially the opposite of Garcian. Each shot deals massive damage, but reloading is slow and risky. Dan can also use a giant charge shot attack by spending blood. Blood is a resource you harvest by killing Heaven Smiles throughout the levels. Blood has a myriad of uses. It can be spent to level up your character's stats, recover lost hit points, and use special moves for characters that have them. So equipped with all I learned from my previous mistakes, I went all out against the Camellia, and this time we emerged victorious. We bump into Travis again, and he says that the Camellia we just killed can produce enough Heaven Smiles to take out an entire country. If we want to stop them, we're going to need to kill their queen. He then pops the trunk and gives us our first soul shell. Again, if this sounds obtuse, that's because it is. With the Camellia removed, we can now proceed into the level. A few corridors later, and this happened. Oh, Jesus. There are a number of similar cutscenes throughout this level, and I think they're mostly there to set up the stakes of why Heaven Smile need to be stopped. Now, speaking of Heaven Smile, there are a lot of them. Almost any room or area you navigate in this game is teeming with them. Not only that, but every time you re-enter an area, the enemies that were there respawn.
Why?
So factor in that they're always invisible until you scan for them, and they will very quickly explode on you if given the chance, and there could be some frustration involved. I think the most annoying thing in the entire game is that whenever a character is killed, if you want to get them back, you need to backtrack to where they died as Garcian, resurrect them, backtrack all over again as said character, just to continue exploring. One factor to mitigate this at least a little bit is that many of the Heaven Smiles have a weak point. If you land an attack on it, they will instantly die. This rewards good aim, and there's a lot of strategy to the movement since it's on rails. It's deliberately confining. It feels really satisfying later on in the game when you understand mechanics fully and you can tear through whole armies of Heaven Smile, but it's definitely a journey to get there. The main gameplay loop besides combat is puzzle solving. There are tons of inventive and novel puzzles to solve here, and they're by far the coolest thing about Killer7. The first puzzle I came across in the prologue is these numbered candles. I'm told I have insufficient flame to light them at this moment in time. There's also an AC unit that I have to turn off or on, but there's no fire to hand, so we had to explore further. In addition to Iwazaru and Travis, there is one more NPC that can provide hints to the player, and it's this guy Yunhoon who has a mask. His hints are pretty vague and not very useful, but if you shoot the mask, you can spend some of your blood to get a much more specific hint.
Did you just flip me off?
No.
Yes, you did. You just flipped me the bird. If you don't shape up, okay, and get your head straight, there, you just flipped me off again.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to show you every single time I speak to Iwazaru, Travis, and Mask Guy, but you can assume often enough that when I'm resolving puzzles, I've collected a few hints while figuring them out. A few corridors and many a death later, and I made my way inside a toilet for our next puzzle. This time we have a toilet that cannot be flushed due to lack of water and a sprinkler on the ceiling. At this point, I'm thinking we need to light the candles to trigger the sprinklers, and that's somehow going to fill the toilet with water or something. I explore a bit more, and the next room is a library. It has bookshelves blocking our path and a locked control panel on the wall. As you can see, you are given a lot of puzzle pieces up front, but you usually cannot solve them all initially. You often have to solve the initial step and then cascade the rest of them from there. While hunting for more clues, I kind of feel like I'm playing Scooby-Doo again here, I decided to check out our next member of the Seven. This time we have Coyote Smith. He has an Enfield revolver and wields it in just the most impractical way possible. How this guy's wrist isn't reduced to a fine powder is beyond me. I think he was one of my least used characters, because almost every time you kill an enemy, he'll say this. Not bad. It gets old really quickly. Also, he and Dan play very similarly, and Dan just seems fundamentally better. As Coyote, we proceeded to a laundry area, and we found a dryer to interact with. Then something totally normal happened. Oh my god, okay. We'll find this disembodied head a few times throughout the game, and they usually give us a new power. There are hints to their backstory, but nothing concrete or plot relevant. So you can see what I mean. Now that we have the fire ring, we can go light those candles, and the puzzles can cascade as we put the pieces together. Very, very cool. So a bunch of combat and Coyote swearing later, and I return to the room with the candles. I equipped the fire ring and proceeded to light the candles in order, but I forgot about the AC unit. So after turning that off, I lit them again, and this is what happened. Not quite what I expected, honestly, but we have a new item to work with at least. I was aiming to go use the fire ring on the sprinkler in the bathroom next, but I was getting pretty tired of Coyote already at this point. So I stopped off in a Harmon room and switched to our next character. This is wildest Smith. He's an ex-luchador, hence the name and appearance, and he dual wields grenade launchers. If that sounds awesome, it is. What? Oh, that was a charge shot, okay. Wait, no, it's not. Okay, this guy is interesting. So Mask is amazing. He can obliterate the weaker Heaven Smiles in one shot, which makes backtracking much less tedious and speeds up exploration. This is offset, however. You receive no blood from enemies that he kills. Remember that blood is spent on character upgrades, health recovery, special moves, and hints, so you absolutely cannot beat the game as just Mask on his own. This is one of the coolest things about Killer7. Each character brings something to the table, and with the exception of Garcian, they can be freely swapped between in the overworld once you've awakened them in a Harmon room. This encourages experimentation and will mean that two people could play the game in entirely different ways. So far I've introduced you to Garcian, Dan, Coyote, and Mask. We still have 3 members left, and there are some further uses for certain members that I haven't covered yet. But to keep things simple, I'll continue to explain them as they crop up in my playthrough, and I'll expand on them when it becomes relevant. With my new best friend Jim Carey, I return to the bathroom. I use the fire ring on the sprinkler, which causes it to release water, and somehow that makes the toilet flushable. A new object falls out of a pipe into the laundry room below, and at this point, I really felt like we were cooking with these puzzles, and I was starting to enjoy the game a ton. I went and yoinked up the freshly flushed engraving, and then I used both of them on the control box in the library. That brought this series of puzzles to a close and revealed our next path. This takes us outside and up a few flights of stairs to the next story of the building. We bump into Iwazaru a few times and he starts freaking out about him. It sounds like whomever he's talking about leads the Heaven Smile and is extremely dangerous. I reached the 4th floor, and after a lot of running around and blowing up Heaven Smiles, I noticed these cracks on the wall. This is one of Mask's additional uses. He can destroy certain walls and objects that block your path. A little further on, and I see this wall with letters written in blood and Travis standing nearby. He tells me that I'll need to use our next member of the Smith Syndicate for this one. So I return to the Harmon room and switch to our next character, Kaide Smith. Kaide has a 10-round scoped pistol, making her our long-range specialist. Her reload time, however, is even worse than Dan's, and I found myself using her very little. Also, if I'm being honest, I found the gratuitous camera angles pretty unnecessary. Nonetheless, we trekked back over to the Blood Wall, and I activated her ability with the Y button. What on earth? No?
No.
So despite how unilluminating that seemed, I explored a bit further and found a door to the boiler room. There was a 2-letter code requirement, and we already know what that is. When I returned to the corridor, everything looks completely different now. The aesthetic has changed from red to green, and the corridor is a different layout. Events like this aren't explained, and you just learn to accept them pretty quickly. I spot Travis, and he says that this is where the queen he mentioned earlier is located. That means if I can slay it, the Heaven Smile will stop replicating this area, and that sounds to me like it's going to be the level. However, to reach the queen, Iwazaru says we need to pay the gatekeeper with soul shells to let us in. The keeper says that I don't have enough shells yet, so the one we collected earlier is not enough. I realized there are a few more puzzles to solve, so I backtracked through the boiler room and explored the area more thoroughly. I came across this wall and the game made this sound. That sound will play whenever you have found something puzzle related in a stage. I pressed the Y button with Kaide and this happened. What? Oh my god, dude, what is happening? Again, I would like to emphasize that I have given you all the context the game gave me. This is just that sort of rodeo. With the barrier destroyed, I yoinked the soul shell and we were ready for the boss. On my way to the boss, I stopped off in a Harmon room and cashed in the blood that I had. This creates serum that is spent on character upgrades. I figured before investing in the character, I should at least see which my favorite is first. This led me to using our second to last Smith Syndicate member, Kevin Smith. Now Kevin is my boy. You are going to see him a lot throughout the rest of this video. His weapon is throwing knives and they're amazing. Every other character has some degree of sway on their aiming, with some being really egregious. Kevin on the other hand has perfect accuracy. He is also the only character that does not need to reload, ever. What a Chad. I mentioned earlier that many of the basic Heaven Smile enemies have a glowing weak point that one-taps them. With Kevin, you can just churn out knives with no aiming sway to shred through those. Couple this with his kills harvesting blood, which Mask cannot do, and he is, in my opinion, the best character by a country mile. Every character has their own uses, narratively, exploration-wise, and combat-wise, so we've still got plenty of value out of the other Smiths, but Kevin is king. After making my way back to the gate and presenting my 2 soul shells, this time I was allowed access. Every stage ends with this setup, and on the way to the boss you get this epic fight song to pump you up. Okay, wasn't expecting that. Before the boss though, we enter this derelict coliseum area and we encounter a creepy ghost child. This guy effectively gives us hints on how to beat significant enemies. He tells us before we can fight the boss, we need to defeat this named smile. This one is a speed smile. It just runs towards you much faster than the regular kind. The cool thing is, once you beat one of these named smiles, future levels will contain that kind as standard, which varies up the enemy encounters and means you need to remember how to defeat each variant. With that dealt with, it really is time for the final boss. There was a Harmon room on the way, so I decided to finally cash in my blood to get some serum and spend it on some upgrades. After playing as him for just a short while, I knew that Kevin was the only sensible choice. You can upgrade any character except for Garcian, as he's really intended just to be used for retrieving dead heads. You can raise a character's damage, attack speed, unique ability, and unlock new methods of dispatching enemies based on the character you'd like to play. I just beefed up all of Kevin's stats to stage 2, and now I was really ready to fight the boss. So you'll sometimes be forced onto a certain character by these security cameras if that character is plot relevant. I guess you can view it as the canonical persona the Syndicate are using at that moment in time. Now I run into Travis here and he calls me Amir, and he also says that I was the only survivor from that time. That doesn't mean much to us now, but it will later, so just remember that. I then see that creepy kid again who gives you battle advice. He says behind the wings there are faces, whatever that means. Why am I in a wheelchair? What is going on? So with no information, now I've suddenly been turned into Harmon Smith. From the information Iwazaru has provided us, and the Harmon rooms we use to change characters, we know that Harmon is the chief of the Killer7. That's all we really have to go on so far. The next bit is just nuts though, and I'm gonna let it play for a minute. Harmon Smith. Does this wheelchair have a giant mounted gun on it?
I'm the mother of this sacred place. Our 4 children served their purpose. They didn't die in vain. We must get rid of bad trees from their roots. I hope you are not one of them.
Good night, child. It's past your bedtime.
This game is an acid trip, dude, and it only gets weirder from here. Now that I was in control, I used Harmon's giant mounted sniper rifle to shoot the wings off this smile. Whatever Suda was smoking when he came up with this game, I need some.
You think you killed me? Better think again.
Alright, there's the faces. So this phase plays out as needing to bait the anime girl smile thing to shoot fire at you. When she does, you can run around her and get a shot on the faces on her back. At first I did a pretty good job of this. I managed to get the 3 masks down without too many issues, but when it came to the 4th one, I was really struggling with Dan's aiming. There's just a lot of sway on his gun and I couldn't get the final shot. This led to me getting toasted and being taken back to the room with Harmon. That means it's time for the big guns. It's Kevin time, baby. On my way back to the boss, I discovered just another reason why Kevin is best boy. He can backflip, dude. In a game where turning around is super slow and exposes you to danger, this is a godsend. I'm telling you, dude, Kevin is MVP. This time with Kevin's speed and accuracy, I absolutely destroyed the boss. We're not quite done yet, though. In the next corridor, we're switched over to Harmon once again. We then see another anime angel girl thing in a chair, but I notice there's this vampire-looking guy flitting in and out behind her. I decide to shoot at him instead, and this is what happened.
Oops. I guess my trick didn't work on you. Tricks are for kids, Kun. I'm an old man.
They trade words about how they've been fighting for 30 years, and Kun Lan keeps losing in both their battles and their chess games. Things then get even crazier.
We both have become burdened with so much, and we don't have time for fun anymore. No, there's always time for fun. It's Friday night.
Oh, this is so dumb. Let's dance, chat! We're back in control of Harmon, and besides this glowy god hand, Kun is completely invincible, so I shoot at it. What the fuck? Oh, we're playing the Matrix!
Awake from your dream. Harmon, the size of the world has changed. It's changed to the size where you can control it with your hands, just like a PDA. The world will keep getting smaller.
This game is amazing. And that is officially the end of the prologue. This game is a fever dream, I swear. Some things will become more clear as we learn about this game and its world moving ahead, but there are also a lot of ambiguities just left to your own interpretation as well. So with that absolute madness out of the way, we're sent back to the chapter selection screen, and it's time for Chapter 1, Sunset. We get a pretty amazing hand-drawn cutscene that explains more about the game's backstory. This is a version of Earth where world peace was achieved and all nuclear warheads were sent out of orbit and detonated to remove them as a threat. But during the first world peace meeting of the United Nations, a new form of terrorist called the Smiling Faces appeared and severed the world peace, and now everyone has missiles again, and things aren't great.
Fear spread throughout the nations like wildfire. There was nothing the police or the military could do to counter the Smiling Faces. The only ones who had any chance of stopping these Smiling Faces were the omniscient and almost godlike professional assassins. The key players behind the scenes of the four powers utilized their connections and called upon the group known as Killer7.
That's the name of the game!
Their only hope rested with them.
We're now controlling Garcian again, and we're inside his home. There are more threads of the mystery introduced to us here. There's this big vault door on one of the walls, and you can hear somebody screaming inside of it throughout the game, but we can't get access. We can also enter Harmon's room, and we find Samantha the maid from earlier, but she's dressed in different clothes and seems to be abusing a seemingly comatose Harmon. However, when I switch to Harmon on the television, we get a cutscene where the main lights are turned off, and then Harmon once again becomes cognizant, and Samantha returns to her maid outfit. Harmon tells us that an old friend of his is trying to bring down the country, and he wants us to stop them. When Samantha turns the lights back on again, they both return to the previous state. Now that we're Garcian again, we can leave his home to get a new cutscene. This is a little confusing, but in this game, there is the United Nations, but there's also the United Nations Party. We're told that the UN Party of Japan is trying to unite the whole world under Japanese rule, and the 200 pulsar missiles have been launched to Japan from an undisclosed location. We need to head to Restaurant Fukushima and assassinate its proprietor, Toru. He is the UN party head, and only with him gone can the Japanese Liberal Party regain control of the country and then negotiate with the US president to save them. With this chapter's mission revealed, we spawned in as Garcian at Restaurant Fukushima, and it's time to explore. Now, in the interest of not letting this video go on for 2 hours, I'm going to be a little bit more concise moving forwards. I'll introduce the last Smith Syndicate member shortly, and we'll cover some of the puzzles, but I won't go into quite as much detail as I did in the prologue. We get switched over to Mask Smith and enter the restaurant. We're confronted by some henchmen who reveal themselves to be Heaven Smile. At this point, story-wise, I deduced that Kun Lan is the leader of Heaven Smile, and he was the friend that Garcian said was attempting to bring down a country. Fukushima and the UN faction of Japan seem to be working with Heaven Smile, and they're attempting to take over the world. I really enjoyed this stage's aesthetic. It's very enclosed, with plenty of winding corridors that lead to some pretty dicey situations when you're getting bombarded by enemies. This makes careful exploration mandatory and introduces new kinds of obstacles and puzzles. The first puzzle clue I found was this dark room. I got the sound effect to let me know I needed to do something here, but at this point I wasn't exactly sure what the solution was. Mask was also feeling a lot less powerful on this stage. I hadn't leveled him up yet, so most of the enemies were no longer one-shots. Therefore, we needed to switch to our best boy Kevin and get back to knife spamming. There are a ton of Heaven Smile in this stage, and exploring can be pretty gutty when you need to clear them out every time you enter or re-enter a room. This did at least farm up plenty of blood that I could use to further buff Kevin though. I made my way to this cool looking garden, and I found a dead tree puzzle clue blocking my way. With no solutions in sight yet, I kept exploring, and I found this new type of named smile. Spiral smiles roll towards you slowly, and they can only be killed by hitting the faces when they reveal themselves. After clearing out the balls, we found a wilted flower, and I made a guess that I would need to find a water ring on this stage. There was also a picture on the wall of a partially bloomed cherry blossom. The next room had these cool looking statues and a locked door with an engraving slot on it. Much like the first level, we have lots of puzzle pieces right now, but we need to find a jumping off point in order to solve them all. The only thing I could think of at this point was needing to make the dead tree bloom, and since I don't have the water ring yet...
Do the blood thing, come on, do it! Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it!
Hey, that's it. They give you absolutely no clue that that's a thing, I just guessed. With the tree removed, I take out a Camellia Smile, and I discover that the only thing here is Travis. He gives me some lore about Japan's survival being contingent on the US president deciding whether or not to intercept the pulsar missiles. But at this point I was feeling pretty lost. So I decided to finally gain some information about gameplay from Iwazaru in a Harmon room. This proved extremely valuable as I learned that Coyote is a professional thief, and not only can he jump to high places, he can pick locks too. Armed with that knowledge, it was time to return to that dark room from earlier. To get there, I decided to use our 7th and final Smith, Con. Con is very weak in combat, but his special ability is super speed.
Dangerous.
Woo! For combat, he has dual automatic pistols. They have wild spray, and I just didn't use them very much. But being able to switch to Con and zip around is fantastic on a big level like this one. I zoomed back to the dark room, and I used Coyote's Y ability to jump onto the rafters. This led us to a new room where we found our favorite disembodied head and the much needed water ring. I really love this game. It's incredibly satisfying when you solve the puzzles, and I just hadn't experienced anything quite like this before. This one made me super excited about the GameCube challenge, as I just probably would never have played this game otherwise. Armed with my new ring, I returned to the vase, and somehow filling it with water made the picture on the wall bloom as well. That then provided the odd engraving, which I used to open the block door from earlier. In a newly accessible area, Iwazaru tells us that Mask's special ability is a suplex, and next to him I found this big pile of wood. But there's the suplex. Inside this room we find a chef with a gun, and after he shoots at us, this happened. Mask kills the Heaven Smile behind him and tells him that he's free to go, but as Mask walks off, the guy just laughs sinisterly. We enter into this absolutely huge outside area, and we meet another kind of smile. These guys move along the ceilings and drop on you and explode if you let them get too close. This whole area is just one giant puzzle, and to sum it up, you need to follow the Feng Shui map, which some of you may recognize has Genbu, Seiryu, Suzaku, and Byaku on it. We had to go to a room in each of the cardinal directions, and there were these sliding doors inside. You just have to close the corresponding sliding door for the associated spirit creature of that cardinal direction. Doing so lowers the giant bridge in the center of the area, and that provides the soul shell we need to reach the boss. This time our way was blocked by a named smile called the Phantom Smile. I actually don't know what this gimmick is, because Kevin makes such light work of them. With all the obstacles out of the way though, we are ready for the boss. The Ghost Kid tells us just to not stop shooting if we want to win. Once again, we're switched to Harmon, and we have the cutscene where he and Toru Fukushima drink tea and exchange insults. However, Toru's assistant then shoots and kills him, and tries to kill Harmon as well. We're now in a fight against her, but I'm not sure if you could call this a boss. I did what the kid from earlier said and just kept attacking. This seems to cause her to miss, and then you just have to run out the clock. After our successful hits get tallied and we win, this is what happened. Okay, now it's a boss. Oh, wait. Oh, I thought she was about to, like, turn into, like, a kaiju or some shit, and then she just exploded. Alright, never mind. What is this game, man? What is happening? We get a few more cutscenes here. First, Garcian meets with a member of the Japanese Liberal Party. They tell us that some of their members are meeting with the US to try and negotiate peace, and have the US stop the missiles. But there is a spy called John DePaul trying to stop these talks from happening and seal Japan's fate. Apparently that sinister chef from earlier was John Paul in disguise. There's also a cutscene where these cynical old members of the UN party condemn a younger member, Kenjiro Matsuka, for not protecting Fukushima and order him to shoot himself. They offer him a gun, but he ends up blowing both of their heads off. He does then point the gun at himself, but he's stopped by Kun Lan. Kun uses his weird god hand powers to resurrect the old men into special smiles, and he alters Matsuka's personality and makes him into the new UN party leader. Those Japan-US negotiations are happening at what's called the Kaku building, and that's where this stage takes place. First, I need to find a way inside. While exploring around the outskirts, I came across this card with letters spray painted on the windscreen. I wrote those down and looked for a place to use them. I eventually found this vending machine, and by following the code from before, I purchased drinks in the correct order, which opened the way inside. I really like this stage. In order to fight DePaul, we need to get 4 soul shells, and each one is on a different floor of the building. On the first floor, I dispatch of all the smiles with Kevin, then while looking around I find this locked control panel. Remembering what I read earlier about Coyote being able to pick locks, we switch over to him and we break our way in. By hitting the switch, I unlock a new room where the next puzzle is. There is a bowl with 2 dice inside, and Mask Hint Man tells me to copy the Kimono Woman. There's a poster on the wall of a woman holding 2 dice in the snake eyes position, and now when I interact with the bowl, it immediately rolls 2 ones and opens a drawer to the first soul shell. On floor 2, I found a picture of playing cards making a straight flush. A dozen Heaven Smiles later, and I found a room containing playing cards on a table. I assumed I needed to beat the straight flush with a royal flush, so I flipped the 9 of spades upside down, and that opened the drawer providing Soul Shell 2. Floor 3 introduces a new named smile, Mother Smiles. Much like camellias, they produce unlimited smiles to attack you, but unlike the camellia, she'll also go towards you directly. Thanks to my massively buffed Kevin though, I spammed some knives at the weak spot, and it wasn't too difficult. This time the clue is a poster showing numbered horses in a certain order. I found this cute little horse racing simulator, and I entered the numbers. Whee! I love this game. With our 3rd soul shell in hand, there was only one more floor to tackle. The 4th floor has these posters on the wall of women posing with beer. Each poster has a Hanafuda symbol on it and a background pattern. We found these Hanafuda cards, and we just needed to match the background to the picture so they match the posters. Doing all that gave us our 4th and final soul shell, and it was time to make our way towards the boss. Blocking our way though was this laser wall, and that leads me on to Kevin's final ability, invisibility. By spending some blood, Kevin can become temporarily invulnerable to damage and not alert any Heaven Smiles to his presence. At this point, I was playing Kevin as often as possible. Being able to skip certain sections of enemies in addition to all the other things from before I mentioned just makes him an absolute dream. Through the door is the usual gatekeeper, and with our 4 soul shells, he opens the way. This time the name Smile is a giant reaper looking thing. They can only be damaged by hitting their sickles enough to make them spin around, and this exposes the weak point on their rear. With that thing down, I made my way up in an elevator, and I was presented with a cracked wall. I switched out to Mask and I did the usual thing. We're then confronted by John DePaul, who makes fun of Lucha Libre and challenges me to battle. At first I did what I always do and I switched out to Kevin, but for the first time in the playthrough, I found an opponent that Kevin couldn't deal with.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
John dodges any attacks that you send at him, and he does a ton of damage back. I noticed that one of the ceiling supports had cracks on it though, so I switched to Mask. That seemed like a pathetic boss fight, but we soon realized the level wasn't over yet. We get this scene of the Liberal Party and US negotiators playing Mahjong, but then one of them is caught cheating.
Cheater? That's a 40-10. It's all over.
So much for negotiations. Inside this room we find a storage box and it contains Head Girl. She offers us the Wind Ring. I then take another elevator to the roof of the building and I found a blocked entrance to a meeting room. So I equip the Wind Ring and this blows the tarp off, revealing the door. It's now time for the proper boss battle and to put Chapter 1 to bed. We find the UN party members that were killed by Matsuka, and they tell us that Japan won't go down without a fight. I found this to be the single most confusing part of the whole game. We're put into a battle with the 2 old men, and they constantly throw bits of their brain at us. None of my attacks seem to have any impact on them, and I explored the whole room without finding any hints on how to proceed. Furthermore, the rail system won't let you go in for a closer look, so I just tried all the characters to see if I needed to be anybody in particular, but I'll be honest, this bit had chat and I stumped for ages. After a really long time and trying just about everything, I used Kevin's accuracy to attack the green tie of the guy on the right. This will sometimes cause it to flip onto his shoulder, and his partner will reach over and fix it for him. I noticed that doing this will expose his brain a tiny bit, so I decided I just needed to try and snipe the back of his head while he fixes the tie. This was really difficult to aim for because they're so far away, but after many attempts, I was able to hit his brain 3 times, and the first guy was down. This left Green Tie Man on his own. You need to keep destroying the brain chunks, and eventually he'll look around for his partner and give you a very brief window where his brain is exposed. But I could barely see him, let alone hit him at this point. We figured I'd need to play as Kaide and use her scope if I wanted any chance to hit it, but because I hadn't used her in this stage, her persona was unawakened and I couldn't switch to her unless I died. Therefore, my dear sweet Kevin made the ultimate sacrifice to help me return to Harmon Room. Once I get back to the TV, I could awaken Kaide and then use her in the level. This is a pretty damn obscure concept for a boss, and I just worked it out through trial and error. It's also kind of weird that if you haven't woken Kaide up earlier on in the level, it's basically impossible. But there it is. With the ability to zoom in now at my disposal, I quickly got back to where I was by taking out the yellow guy, and now once again we just need to finish off Time Man. This was still pretty tricky to do. Kaide has terrible sway on her aim, and the window to hit his brain is very short. Couple this with the need to keep destroying brain chunks, and this was a really tough boss. Oh, what an absolute monstrosity. With the boss fight finally defeated, we see a cutscene of Garcian watching the missiles heading for Japan. With the talks between Japan and the US broken down, the US president does not intercede, and Japan is all but destroyed. That brings Sunset to a close. On to Chapter 2, Cloudman.
The name's Andre Almeida. I am a man with a plan. The people will come to me for salvation.
Almeida here raves about how people are desperate for meaning and they want to see something happen. He predicts that the stadium behind him will be destroyed.
Oh my God, I can't hold back. Oh God, I'm coming. Yeah! See, I told you, this
He then claims to have founded a new faith, and he challenges Garcian to track him down. Garcian accepts, and he says that only somebody from Texas would wear a Texas Broncos t-shirt, so he'll start searching there. We get a cutscene set in Almeda Intercity with this creepy, hyper-stylized Texan man. Supposedly this is a utopian society located in the middle of a desert, and it houses Almeida and his cult members. Next we bump into Iwazaru, who states that he can't stand afros and he'll be sitting this one out. This is such a weird game. This is probably the most self-contained level in this game. It doesn't relate to the plot with Japan or have any lasting impact on the story moving forwards. As such, I'm going to give you the Cliff's Notes version to help move this video along. It's still a fun level though, and much like any other aspect of the game I've chosen not to go into details with, it's totally worth playing for yourself to check it out. The goal of this chapter is to find a way to meet with Almeida. He's the president of a company called First Life Corporation, and it is the employer and benefactor of all of the town's cultists. You still fight through hordes of Heaven Smiles here, but you also encounter the occasional resident that will give you background on Almeida. The main sentiment that is he came out of nowhere and he somehow acquired unfathomable levels of power and influence. First Life also seems to have sprung up, and nobody really knows what it is that they make. We're told that the only way to meet with Almeida is to collect a complete set of 12 figurines called the President's Collection. He will let anybody with the full set enter the First Life building. The majority of the level is spent solving puzzles to collect the figurines. Some are rewarded directly, and others you have to find coins that can be used on dispenser machines to have a chance at earning a new one. After a bunch of exploration, I managed to acquire all 12 figurines. We then made our way up through a mountain pass above the town, leading towards the gigantic First Life Corporation building in the distance. Before we could enter the building, however, there was also one last puzzle to complete. There is a security panel on the perimeter fence that asks you a series of questions about First Life and Almeida. The answers are discovered by remembering various details about this series of promotional posters that really sell the idea of First Life as a cult. After inputting information like First Life's slogan and how many people were on a certain poster, etc., the security gate is opened and we can proceed to First Life. With the way clear, it's time to enter the building and meet with Almeida. Once we enter the door though, it's revealed that the entire building was just a cardboard cutout and Almeida actually operates out of this tiny little trailer.
Ah, you made it. Well, how was your trip here?
I say.
This city I've created is a paradise. Life here is perfectly autonomous, a model of peace. But our corporation, First Life Inc., it doesn't exist, no sir. It just runs commercials. You see, people judge books by the covers.
This was a cute twist. After interacting with the whole town, talking about how amazing Almeida is and seeing all the First Life propaganda, his company being nothing but the image of success that doesn't make anything or sell anything is kind of amazing. After some more insane ramblings, Almeida picks this guy Clemens out of his employees to ascend and join him.
Clemens,
I love this game.
Is yours. Go ahead, take a spin.
Huh? This car? Is it really mine?
Of course it is. Now take it and do what you want with it.
It's really mine.
Hop in and find out.
Rocket car! Apparently Clemens needs to reach the finish line without driving himself to death. If he can, he quote-unquote wins and will reach Almeida's level. I really wish I could explain what's happening here or give you more context, but this honest to God is it. This is just how Suda games are. Absolutely nuts, and you just need to interpret their meaning and messages on your own. Almeida tells us that he infected himself with hundreds of diseases and he overcame them all to make vaccines for his followers, but the reason he invited us here is so that we can kill him if he ever gets infected with Heaven Smile. Apparently we're the only ones that can kill Smiles. Immediately after he says this, however, the US government appears out of nowhere and they inject him with a syringe. Apparently they're trying to make him produce a vaccine for Heaven Smile. This, however, does not work, and he goes through a truly insane transformation. Jesus Christ. What is going on? This game, dude. So because this chapter doesn't feature the UN party or Kunlan, there are no soul shells or gatekeeper, we just proceed to the boss fight here. We have this weird infinite series of ambulances to navigate, and Almeida is constantly chasing after us. The idea is you need to get behind him and attack his afro, as that's his weak spot, but this took me a couple of attempts, and unfortunately it is a long-ass trek back to this fight. A very large amount of time later though, I managed to get behind him, and Kevin chopped up the afro with a well-placed knife. Almeida proceeds to explode into blood rain again, but this time he's gone for good. That guy's still driving. He lived!
What happened to Mr. Almeida? This blood. It tastes like Mr. Almeida's.
How do you know that, dude?
He's dead, isn't he?
And that is the end of this off-the-wall chapter. Despite the setup, we don't see or hear from Clemens again in this game. Apparently, this game was originally meant to tie in with the wider Sudaverse, but as of yet that hasn't happened, but maybe they'll follow up on this story sometime down the road. With that sheer absurdity complete, we're now on to Chapter 3, Encounter. This chapter is about stopping the assassin Curtis Blackburn. He is taken to child trafficking and organ harvesting to assist in the manufacture of Heaven's Smile. I haven't shown them all, but every chapter starts with us being returned to Garcian's trailer. There's still the locked safe with somebody yelling inside, and we get a scene of Samantha abusing Harmon's comatose body in various ways. You then get a scene when you turn the lights off where Garcian and Harmon discuss the next target. These things are still as much of a mystery to me as ever, so I haven't shown them all, but I brought them up again as there will be more developments with them later on. To stop Blackburn, we're sent to an amusement park called ISZK Land. Apparently it's a human trafficking front and is used by Blackburn to transfer orphans. This chapter goes very dark, so just be warned. In strong contrast to the brutal subject matter of this chapter, the environments here are incredible. This might be the strongest level aesthetically. It's almost like a sinister version of the Gold Saucer from Final Fantasy VII. We get a new unique smile to fight called Protector Smiles, and they're covered in indestructible armor. Initially I wasn't sure what to do about these guys and just face tank the explosions, but eventually I realized you need to blow them up with Mask. I haven't shown a huge amount of the combat we engage in during level traversal in this video, but as I mentioned during the prologue, there are a ton of smiles to fight in every stage. I'm primarily focusing on the puzzles in this video, as these are the roadblocks that bar game and story progression, but anytime you see the time on the video jump up in large chunks, you can assume I'm fighting through hordes of smiles. This was the point in the game where I truly fallen in love. It was incredibly satisfying to understand all the mechanics and just being able to cruise through enemies and puzzles. There is still plenty of challenge, but I really felt like I'd grown from the experiences thus far. We end up on this giant row of theaters, and this leads us to our first array of puzzles. Inside the first theater, I walked onto the stage and I noticed a crack on the wall. I did the usual thing with Mask, but something unexpected happened next. Whoa! Now you are the main event? What? There is no elaboration in the game on what just happened or why, but Mask is now effectively superpowered. Our grenades are stronger and faster than before, we reload insanely quickly. I kind of assumed this was a temporary thing, but this is just a straight upgrade for the rest of the game. Mask is now better than ever at just destroying Smiles. You do need to remember that you receive no blood for Smiles he kills though, and you'll need plenty of blood for various reasons throughout the game. I like this balancing mechanic. It gives you the freedom to decide when to use Mask and when not. The next theater just contained Travis for a little exposition, so we moved along. The third one had a more powerful version of the Camellia Smile inside. This time it had 3 weak spots and a faster spawn rate. Mask seemed unable to damage the weak spots, and Kevin wasn't awakened yet in this stage, so Coyote got a little bit of use. At this point, I'd spent all my upgrades on Kevin though, so playing anyone but him and the newly buffed Mask does not feel great. From here I started spending my serum evenly and got the whole cast to level 2 across the board. I won't always show when I'm upgrading characters in the video, but I did generally from this point on keep them all kind of the same power level. Beating the Camellia Smile gets us another info dump from Travis, and he gives us some very important lore. Dan Smith used to work with Curtis Blackburn and another man named Pedro Montana. The three of them were part of the Seattle Self-Defense Department. Montana turned Curtis against Dan, and this led to Dan being killed by Curtis. This means that Dan Smith is canonically dead. Travis also says that Harmon recovered his body at the time. My working theory at this point in the playthrough was that Harmon and Kunlan are essentially godlike beings, and they're locked in a never-ending battle. Kun has the god hand and can make heaven smile, while Harmon can assimilate the dead and make them into his personas. That would mean that the 7 personas that we play as are all actually Harmon, and when he assimilates a person, they are given his surname Smith and become a part of the Syndicate. I'll discuss this stuff more in later chapters, as I did get quite a lot of it right, but there are also a few things I got wrong. I just wanted to let you know where I was at with the information to hand, and hopefully make things a little bit more cohesive for you moving forwards. There was a 4th and final theater to explore, and this one was nice and simple. There was a padlocked chest on the stage, so I brought out Coyote to pick it. Inside was Head Girl, and she gave me the next power-up ring, the Time Ring. Outside this last theater, there's an alley covered in debris containing a clock. Taking the hint, I quit the time ring, and by winding back time, I was able to clear the debris and grab an odd engraving. On the opposite end of the theater complex was a breaker unit. The engraving unlocked it, and by flipping the fuse, we returned power to the street, and then it showed these balloons coming down. I also found a large door with cracks in it, and I broke it down with Mask. This led to a giant plaza with multiple buildings to explore. The first building was called Freaky Funhouse. It was full to bursting with Heaven Smile, but with the newly amped up Mask, we handled them without too many issues. I found a new kind of obstacle, which was a small passageway. Since Colt is the smallest Smith, I guess that he would be the best candidate. Con's the smallest. So the others couldn't have just lie down and slid through or anything. Yeah. If we had Kevin, Kevin's posture is so bad, he would have just been able to walk straight under, I'm sure. The door here led to a big maze full of smiles. Again, the aesthetic for this stage is just on point. Now this would be an infinite loop, but fortunately for us, there's a crack on one of the walls. After breaking through, we entered into the next area, Squeaker's Attack. I wasn't sure what they wanted me to do here, as I couldn't trigger the whack-a-mole game in the middle, but when I tried to go to the next area, this happened. Burning hot hell? Oh, here we go. That's one way to do it. Burning Hot Hell has this burning bridge in the way. At first I thought maybe Kaide puts it out with her blood, but the answer was a much more simple, just use the water ring. On the other side we have to slay some demonic gorillas, not the RuneScape ones mind you. This consists of shooting the targets on them. Some were pretty far away, so it was a good chance to use Kaide's scope. This is one of my favorite aspects of Killer7 by far. Every character gets some playtime on more or less every stage. Thanks to all the unique abilities and puzzles, even for me, it wasn't just the Kevin show. There was one last room to do here called Spinny Spinny. We're told that we need to catch up to the giant smile enemy, but if we get too close, they will blow up. Since Connor's the only character fast enough, I switched him in. Sadly, I immediately ran too quickly. Oh. Alright, that's why you don't want to get too close. Since you require Con to fight this boss, I then had the horrendous task of making my way back to that area as Garcian, recovering Con's head, rezzing him, and then getting back there again. I really love this game, but it can be super tedious when it takes a 15-minute round trip just to get one attempt on an enemy. I haven't mentioned this yet, but whenever you switch to Garcian or revive a member, you hear this line.
Don't make me say it again. I'm a cleaner.
Anyone that has played this game will both remember and revile this line, as you hear it a lot. I can't remember exactly how many times I died here, but it was at least twice, and it was definitely painful trekking back every time. I did eventually pull it off, and killing that smile revealed this creepy anime angel smile. She offered me a soul shell and a demon gun upgrade for Dan. I then went to the other building on the plaza called the Killer Mansion. This is a maze of sorts and it contains a bunch of different enemies and a series of doors to navigate through. This took me a little while to figure out, but you just need to find the door with the front-facing smile above it each time. You essentially fight through a variety of unique smiles that you've encountered in the past, so it's kind of cool having to remember their mechanics. Now, one funny thing that did happen while I was doing this section was I accidentally opened the map I literally had no idea until this point that there even was a map, thus I hadn't used it for the entire game until this point. And as it turns out, the map is amazing. It shows hints as to where puzzles are, which character can solve them, and shows all the entrances and exits to the area that you're in. I'll be honest and say that I probably would have saved myself hours in this playthrough if I'd known this earlier. I cut out a ton of footage of me getting lost in the video, but I saw the humor in the situation, and for the rest of the playthrough, I got a ton of value out of the map. Once the maze was complete, I entered a room with this opening up high. I switched to Coyote and tried to jump inside, but nothing was happening. At this point, I majorly derped. Turns out I hadn't gotten close enough to trigger the option, and I took this weird sofa out of the room before I realized this sent me back to the start of the maze and meant I had to do the whole thing again.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
With that major derp out of the way, I made it all the way back through the maze. Oh, you can't? What? I tried this earlier and it didn't do it. What a waste of time. Travis is up here and he tells us that Curtis not only traffics people and harvests their organs, but he also keeps all the female orphans for himself and he lives with them. This guy is essentially the ultimate creep, and I was itching to put him down at this point. Travis hands us the second soul shell. I then return to where those balloons fell down and use the wind ring on them to get the third and final one. With all 3 soul shells in hand, it's finally time to make our way towards the boss. At this point, as it seems to have become tradition, my amazing mod Fell Shadow had created an emote for my Twitch channel based on the game that we're playing. This time it's this absolute banger of a Kevin dance. Big shoutouts to him, as it's really fun collecting emotes for each game and seeing people spam Kevin or Casper in my chat every now and then. The Gatekeeper smile this time is the armored mithril smile. I suspect they want you to blow off its armor with Mask, but when you have Kevin, who needs to do that? The Ghost Kid tells me that this boss is only vulnerable in the light, so I was expecting some sort of shadow smile this time around, but I was unprepared for what's to come. This game is so crazy. So now we're fighting an ultra-fast anime girl with a gun. You might have noticed her surname Blackburn is the same as Curtis's. He's one of the children she abducted, and he essentially made her into his creepy daughter/protege. The gimmick to this fight is that she runs around you at ludicrous speed. She can only be hurt when she's in the light of the street lamps, and each time you damage her, she'll get even faster. I initially did what I always do and tried to use Kevin. Sadly though, his knives didn't make for a good match against how fast she is. This led to me switching in Con and using the insane spray from his pistols to try and hit her each time she passed. I could tell I was damaging her as she would occasionally scream and start to move faster, but this was a really ineffective method to fight her, and eventually her random bullet spray took me down. I decided since that wasn't working, it made more sense to hit her with one big attack than spray wildly, so I used my serum to buff up Mask a bunch and I ran back to the boss room. This proved to be on the money. This time I took her out in less than a minute. She retreats onto this bus, and you can hear the sounds of children on board, which has really grisly implications. We then get a creepy little jingle, and we're told that this is only the first part of Chapter 3. We now get a cutscene where Curtis aims a gun at Pedro, whom you might remember was the one that tricked Curtis into killing Dan in the past. Apparently they had a deal where Curtis took all of the girl orphans and Pedro took all of the boys, but Pedro wanted a bigger share of the profits and tried to take some of Curtis's cut. If you didn't already think Curtis is one of the most villainous and disgusting characters in a video game, this should seal the deal.
Your wife's name is Pamela, right? And your son, Paul.
What have you done to them?
Pamela sure has a mole in a unique place. You know, it kinda turned me on.
Jesus Christ. He tells Pedro that the blood behind them is from Pedro's family. He says that Pedro's son was a sissy when he died, and then Pedro asks about where his daughter is.
You mean your little girl, Mary?
Mary, where is she?
Right here.
Jesus Christ. So yeah, this guy needs to die. Garcian pursues Curtis back to his mansion, and the mission is once again to track him down and kill him. Since this is part 2 of the level, and this video is really getting away from me, I'll be giving you the Cliff's Notes on this one too. This is probably the smallest environment in the game. You need to navigate Curtis's mansion, which is protected by Heaven Smile, and do the usual puzzle solving. We're never told that Curtis works for Kunlan or anything, but since Heaven Smile's goal is to cause terror and prevent world peace, I assume evil ambitions like Curtis and Pedro's fit with their plans. At this point, each stage takes advantage of more or less every character and their unique powers, also several of the rings. To explore this map, we needed to use Kevin to pass through laser fences, Con to squeeze through gaps, Coyote to ascend heights and pick locks, and we needed to use the rings to put out fires. During my travels, I was running away from a Heaven Smile and I entered through a random door, and I stumbled across Ayame Blackburn again. We need to fight her one more time, but this version's a little different. The room is covered in these garage doors that randomly open and shut. Ayame will run out of an open one into the light before shooting at you, and then she'll retreat again. I knew from the last time the mask was the right play here. She has tons more health though, and it took a number of shots to take her down. I did start to wonder if I was doing something wrong. I stayed the course however, and eventually she stopped using the doors and just tried to straight up shoot me. Okay, there we go. Jesus, that was close. Woo. Oh, that's why her head's all fucked up. Okay, that explains it. You might not have caught it, but her face there is revealed to be the same one as the girl in the cutscene that started this chapter when Curtis was invading an embassy. So the implication is that he abducted that girl and brainwashed her into being his protege. Again, I know I'm barreling through this stage, but you've seen most of the puzzle types already, and if you decide to check the game out for yourself, it's also nice to have a few bits to discover. One unique puzzle though that was kind of cool is we go inside Curtis's garage.
The garage? Hey, fellas, the garage. Well, ooh-la-dee-da, Mr. Frenchman.
Well, what do you call it?
A car hole.
Sorry, Curtis's car hole. He has a very large collection of sports cars, and there's a control panel that can move them around. A picture on the wall shows that we need to create an opening in the middle right. It's a simple solution, but they go through the trouble of animating the whole thing, which is nice. This is our final encounter with Head Girl, or as I now know she's called, Susie. She gives us the final power-up ring, the Power Ring. A bit like Travis, I think Susie is a phantom of somebody killed by the Smith Syndicate. She gives pieces of her backstory throughout your encounters in the game, but like most things, it's left purposefully vague. Now, funnily enough, in the same ring we got the Power Ring, there's this security box on the wall with a damaged circuit. Naturally, I thought the Power Ring would be the solution, but apparently not. I spent ages trying every character and all the rings, etc., and just nothing was working. As it turns out, you just need to hit it, which is kind of dumb. Then after all that, it just turns off the fences, which you're already able to get through with Kevin. Bit of a dick move, in my opinion. Besides that, the puzzle that gave me the biggest headache on this stage was a statue containing a soul shell. The map was showing that Dan was the way to resolve it, but I tried a bunch of different things, and I could not work out what the answer was. I kept coming back and trying all sorts, but it ended up being the last thing keeping me from the boss. After a long time, Chat and I decided that maybe with the recent demon gun upgrade Dan had received, his charge shot may have new properties I don't know about. To use it, I need to stock up on blood, so I've roamed around the map as Kevin and I farmed some out. Finally, we have enough vials of blood stocked up to give it a go. Dude, how would I have known that? Like, what do you mean? I think getting stuck here was my single biggest roadblock in the whole game, with which hindsight's really funny. I'm sure if I'd spoken to Iwazaru in the Harmon room, he would have told me about the demon gun, but it didn't occur to me at the time. After that ordeal, I switched back to my boy and proceeded to the boss gate. Kevin is the main character, and I won't be told otherwise. The Gatekeeper smile this time is the laser smile. Kevin one-shot it this time, but these guys being added to future levels was a pain. They have a hugely damaging laser shot, and it's almost impossible to dodge. With everything on this level wrapped up, it was time to check out our next crazy boss fight. Oh yeah, it's Kevin time. On our way there, we see the ghost kid who tells me to not trust Curtis's eyes, but I can trust the pigeon instead. Okay. There's a security locked door preventing access to Curtis's room, but switching to Dan can open it, presumably because they used to be partners.
Danny boy, look at you. You've changed considerably. Into a badass, if I may.
Yeah, and you've changed a lot too. Into an old man.
A few more zingers later, and it's on. Okay. At first I was a little confused because every time I took aim, he'd immediately shoot me and score a point. It took me a few mistakes to realize what I needed to do. Gotta wait, oh, we gotta wait till the bird flies. There we go. Okay, wait. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I understand. I get it. I should have listened to the instructions. Once we got back and we waited for the pigeon to fly each time, I had far more success. I racked up 2 points and I thought I had it in the bag, but then... Oh, I got baited! Stupid pigeon! So much for trusting the pigeon, man. After more back and forth, we both had 3 stars and it came down to the wire. I've tried to be sparing on cutscenes in this video, but this one is something else.
Looks like this is your end.
Oh, guess you think this is pretty funny.
You got quite a hobby here, old man.
Doesn't hurt to have a hobby after retirement. What do you think?
Give me a break, you sick old man.
What the fuck, dude? Oh, this is too good. Alright, please say he's actually dead. Oh. So all the girls that he...
Life, wonderful indeed.
Kills, like, that's what happens to them. This game is an acid trip, for real. After that brutal insanity, Encounter comes to a close, and it's on to our second to last chapter, Alter Ego. At this point, we're in the final stretch. This chapter is one of the shortest and not especially lore intense, so I'm going to again condense it down. After that, we essentially have one more left, and it's the most lore significant in the whole game.
We are the Punishing Rangers, the Handsome Men!
So in this chapter, we're introduced to the Super Sentai parody group, the Handsome Men. A group of heroes designed by the US military to combat Heaven Smile now that the threat has gone global. The twist is, they were caught assassinating a US politician and are now considered extremely dangerous. Apparently by sheer coincidence, there is a comic called The Handsome Men that has characters that look just like them, and before that politician was killed, the same thing happened in the comics. Thus it's suspected that the comic's author, Trevor Pearl Harbor, is somehow controlling the Handsome Men with what he draws. In the latest issue, the Handsome Men take on Harmon Smith, so our government lead deduces that the Killer7 are the next target. Therefore, we need to head to the Dominican Republic where Pearl Harbor has a villa and stop him. The main gimmick of this stage is that it's a lost city of smiles. The streets loop infinitely and are populated with really dangerous smiles like mothers and lasers. From a hint Iwazaru gives, I'm told to follow the musician's song, and Kon apparently has the best hearing. So we needed to work our way along the streets as Kon, and when music is heard coming from a side passage, follow it. This was tough because Kon is very weak in combat, and I had a new type of smile to deal with that instantly teleport on you and explode unless you hit their weak spot. With Kon's terrible aim, and Kevin not yet awakened, and Mars being unable to hit weak points, I had a miserable time here. Every time I progressed a little, I would be lasered or exploded, need to run back with Garcian, resurrect the character that died, and get all the way back there again. While we're doing all this, we occasionally find Iwazaru. He has been collecting color samples and says he is the hero of this chapter. These samples give the exact color of each Handsome Men member, and you need all 9 to discover the password into Pearl Harbor's villa. Travis also provides some lore here and tells us that Pearl Harbor, rather than controlling the Handsome Men, happens to be clairvoyant, and the stories he writes about the Handsome Men do predict the future, but don't control them. Crazy stuff. Again, probably the smallest and most simple level. It ended up taking me several hours though, due to the huge number of times I died and needing to constantly do the Garcian reviving cycle. So we cautiously made our way through the winding streets and solved a few puzzles with our various party members. Each time Iwazaru would present us with a new color sample. Eventually I acquired all 9 and made my way to the top of the town where the villa is located. Outside there is a control panel, and when you interact with it, your character automatically enters the information from the samples and unlocks the door.
It's Dan Smith, my man!
Yo, how's it going with next week's story, huh?
Whoa, this is unbelievable. You really came? I didn't think I had such power.
You're one lucky guy, you know that? Let me ask you, what happens to your prophecy if I shoot you right now?
Oh, I already wrote it. I wrote the story, so you'll die. Hey, it's almost time for their appearance. The appearance of heroes. Kill Dan. Give him the old handsome wink stuff. Handsome wink.
Handsome face.
Get down.
Didn't see that coming now, did you, Trevor? Dan manages to kill Handsome Black, and the rest of the Handsome Men see. Then they swear revenge on the Killer7 and challenge us to battle.
Let's settle this once and for all. 7 versus 7, fair and square.
So yeah, we're suddenly transported all the way to New York, and this boss is a standoff with the Handsome Men. Despite them saying it's a 7v7, Harmon is here, making it an 8v8. We get a full-on anime introduction to each Handsome Man. We then see the entire Killer7 and Harmon stare down the 8 Handsome Men. Harmon taunts them, and it's time to fight.
I think that's enough chit-chat. Shall we begin?
Oh wait, he's in a wheelchair as well? So are they copying my abilities, or what?
First matchup, Harmon Smith versus Handsome Red. Hajime! Hajime!
Okay. So each Killer7 member needs to battle against a Handsome Man, copying their fighting style. I wasn't sure at the time, but now I know that the outcomes of each fight are predetermined. Harmon defeats Handsome Red, Con loses to White Pearl, Coyote beats Handsome Gold. Oh.
You're fucked.
even said the lion. Kaide loses to Handsome Light Brown.
Fifth matchup, Kevin Smith versus Handsome Dead. Hajime!
Kevin! Kevin! Dan defeats Handsome Blue, and that brings the score to even.
Seventh matchup, Mask Smith versus Handsome Purple. Hajime! Hajime!
What? Do I actually lose? So once again, Mask is inexplicably transformed into a more powerful form for the rest of the game. It took me a minute to figure out what to do here, but this form now lets us spend blood to do a charged up shot, and that's what we needed to do to win this one.
They know who's the strongest.
Good call, good call. Now the final bout between Garcian and Handsome Pink is interrupted with a cutscene. Apparently Handsome Pink's real identity is Love Wilcox, a prodigious gamer. She wants revenge on Trevor's killer, but knows that it wasn't us. She then disappears into a beam of light, ending the fight. I can't, like, none of this makes any sense. So that's chapter 4 down. I once again gave you all the context that I had, so if this all seems mad and wildly confusing, it totally was. This is our final big chapter. Chapter 5, Smile. I get control of Garcian in his house like normal, but this time, things have changed. Inside Harmon's room, we find Samantha has been killed and left in Harmon's now vacant chair. It's implied that he violated and killed her, presumably for all the abuse she inflicted while he was comatose. For the first time ever, the vault door is completely silent too, which makes everything feel very ominous, and we can now access the Forbidden Room. Inside, we get a cutscene of Harmon and Kun Lan playing chess and talking like friends. When they notice Garcian, we get this reaction. What the fuck? At this point, I was totally baffled. I figured we just needed to finish the story and then maybe things would make a modicum of sense. We get a cutscene explaining that after the events in Sunset, Japan was destroyed and Kenjiro Matsuka and the UN Party have become the leaders of a secret underground organization of displaced Japanese citizens. He kills our Liberal Party informant from Chapter 2 and is now unopposed as a threat to the US. After assigning us to stop them, our government contact tells Garcian that he needs to tell him something important.
Okay, 30 years ago, you and Harmon...
No law for us. It sounds like everything is connected to 30 years ago, which in previous chapters we were told that is how long Harmon and Kunlan have been fighting for, and when the Killer7 were created, but no further details yet. We then make our way to a hotel in Philadelphia to try and stop Matsuka, who is meeting with the United Nations members to discuss overthrowing the US government. Garcian arrives at the Union Hotel and is greeted by the maitre d', who recognizes Garcian and tells him to head to the top floor. Confused, Garcian asks how he knows his name, and he replies that he remembers all of his guests, implying that we've been here before. After that, he vanishes and the hotel is infested with Heaven Smile. The hotel plays out as needing to take the elevator to every floor and collect 6 soul shells. There was a blood-soaked wall in the lobby, but I couldn't use Kaide's power without vials of blood to hand. I proceeded to the second floor and was faced with an army of Heaven Smile, including a supercharged Camellia that can only be finished with Dan's charge shot into the red weak point. With plenty of blood to hand now, I returned to the lobby and grabbed the first shell. Back on floor 2, I took down the Heaven Smile once more. I then navigated the corridors to room 203, which was the only one unlocked. Inside, I found the next bullet near the windows. Floor 3 had a bunch of different named smiles on it, including the ones on the ceiling, the teleporting ones, and the Reapers. Thankfully, by this point, I'd maxed out Kevin's stats, and he now had the ability to lock onto weak points, which is god tier. This floor's soul shell is inside a bathtub with a hairdryer electrifying the water. I thought this might finally be where the powering does something, but once again, no powering, just cut the cord with your weapon. Floor 4 has a room containing a cracked bookcase. I did the usual thing with mask and blew a hole in it. This provided soul shell number 4. Floor 5 has a room that is too dark to see inside properly. There are some candles on the table, and nice and simply, I used the fire ring to light them and reveal bullet 5. I also found the ghost of our government handler, Mills, on this floor. He told me that he was assassinated for digging into the US elections, and we need to seek out the truth for ourselves. I haven't shown them all, but every floor of the hotel is crawling in smiles, and they are a big mishmash of the named ones we've been encountering throughout the game. This floor had laser smiles on it, which can be an absolute pain, but I had plenty of blood and had just taken to spamming Kevin's invisibility at this point. The room on this floor had a lock on the door, so I used Coyote to pick it and enter. No puzzle in this one. Instead, we have Travis, who says the bullet was stuck in the chair he is sitting on, and that we have been in this hotel before. He says the charade is over and we need to remember what the bullets mean. The story was as vague as ever at this point, but my working theory was that we were delving into the past of the Smith Syndicate, and this hotel is where the Killer7 were murdered. With 6 bullets in hand, I was now able to access the top floor. When we exited the elevator, it was covered in these creepy looking flowers, and Iruzaru was hanging nearby. He starts freaking out and telling us that we're in great danger. He says once you use the ring, you cannot go back. As confused as ever, I entered the room next to him, and this led to the familiar pre-boss gate. I was told I didn't have enough bullets yet, which meant that there must be a hidden 7th one somewhere. I took what Iruzaru said about the ring to mean one of the power rings would help me here, and equipping the wind ring allowed me to blow the flowers away and retrieve the 7th bullet. This time our pre-boss name smile is the Timer Smile, and this was the first one that gave me genuine trouble. It's covered in red bumps, which are its only vulnerable spot, meaning that you need to break them all to kill it. But each time you destroy one, it moves faster and faster. The bumps are so small that Kevin wasn't working out, so I brought out Kaide so that we could use her scope for better aim. Her gun still waves around a ton though, and when you get to the final weak spot, the Timer Smile runs flat out until it blows you up. I had some potato aim problems, and it took several attempts before I managed to shoot the last weak point in time. It makes sense that they made this smile tough though, because it turns out there is no other boss fight in this part. Instead, we go through a door and we get this cutscene. This guy?
The one they call Matsuken.
No, Kanjiro Matsuoka is not here. I already handed him over.
Where?
How about I give you a clue?
You know we don't have time for puzzles.
Of course. A new informant is waiting. When you find yourself getting close to the truth, please come again. I'm afraid our time is up. Good day.
So after all that, apparently Matsuka has already been dealt with by these mystery guys, and they tell me I need to learn the truth before they'll tell me more. We return to Garcian's trailer, and now that Samantha is dead and cannot save the game for me, she is replaced by this unnamed steward for the rest of the game. We get a cutscene with the assassin that killed Mills, echoing what he said in the hotel. She tells us to decipher how the system works and seek the real enemies. I don't think it's explained on screen why, but we head to Coburn Elementary School to carry out said investigation. Upon our arrival, Travis tells me that this school secretly picks every US president and that the first ever president was the principal of this school. Inside, Iwasaru then tells me that this is the last mission of the Syndicate and to use my personas with abandon. We're nearing the end of the game at this point, but it's not going down without a fight. This school is one of the bigger environments to explore in the game, and it is brimming with the more difficult versions of Heaven's Smile. Factor in enemies respawning every time you enter or re-enter an area, and death means that you need to do head retrieval with Garcian, and this was a real gauntlet. By this point, I was getting a ton of use out of the map. Again, it's regrettable that I discovered the map only halfway through the game, but this level would have been borderline impossible without it showing me hints towards puzzles and helping me navigate. The first thing I found was this door to the ladies' bathroom, and I got the little music stinger to inform me there was something of note here. I switched to Kaide as she is the only female member of the Seven, and that got me inside. Somehow, flushing the toilet made a carrier pigeon appear and hand me a letter. The letter told me to head to the principal's office and gave me the first of 2 codes to access it. There are a bunch of classrooms dotted around that you can enter, and most of them contain cassette tapes that I began to collect. One of the rooms had graffiti on the chalkboard saying 666 L3G, so I made a note of that. At this point, I was writing down anything that I thought might be relevant, as this stage has a lot going on. I continued plowing through the smiles in the corridors and collecting tapes in each of the classrooms. I eventually found locker 666, and since there was no interaction prompt for it, I decided to knife it instead. This provided me my first soul shell for the level and another tape to add to the collection. I found this giant important looking door in one of the corridors, but it has a special lock that I cannot open on it. I also found Yun Hoon and paid blood for his mask to give me a better hint, and he said to close a door to open another. Putting 2 and 2 together, I started closing the doors on the lockers, which would then mean opening a different one. After the first few times of doing this, it led me to the final upgrade for Mask. After that, there was still a locker door open, so I kept on shooting them shut, and eventually that opened the big special door from before. This led me to a new area containing the cafeteria and the biggest Camellia smile I've ever seen. This one has a ridiculous number of weak points and cranked out basic smiles quicker than ever. Now more than ever, having a totally maxed out Kevin was amazing. His late game ability to lock onto weak points just made it so I could farm an unlimited amount of blood quickly and finish maxing out the remainder of the 7. Once that was done, I used his super fast attack speed to blitz down the yellow weak points. That left the red one, which by this point we know that only Dan can destroy with his charge shot. I continued exploring the new area and found a few different Travis interactions. He mostly repeats himself about the elections being a sham and that this school picks the president. I also found the boss gate room for this level. I didn't think that I would be able to pay the toll as there were still puzzles on the map that I hadn't done yet. But out of curiosity, I tried anyway, and I was surprised to find that 1 shell was enough to let me in. This level's name smile is the Galactic Tomahawk Smile, which is quite the name. It lobs these exploding orbs at you constantly. I'm honestly not sure if there was a strategy I missed here. Maybe you're supposed to use the powered up mask, but I just spammed a ton as Kevin and brute force by spending my blood to heal constantly, and eventually that got the job done. I found another cassette inside this room and was pretty unsure at this point what to do with them, but I assumed the game would tell me eventually. On the other side of the gate was the principal's room. I was switched to Garcian before getting a cutscene.
And who might you be?
What's going on here?
Would you like to join me for a game of Russian roulette?
I just met you, dude. This is so weird. The principal here is the presidential hopeful and wants Garcian to assassinate the current president for him. He says that if I win Russian roulette, he'll tell Garcian how to hit on women with a 100% success rate. But if he wins, then I need to assassinate the president for him. Not sure how that works with the loser being dead and all, but whatever. They both survive the first 5 rounds, and the principal tells Garcian that he loses.
This gun holds 7 bullets.
Oh,
I'm a
God.
Professional. You can't fool me, old man.
Seeing through the apparent deceit, Garcian wins the roulette, and the principal follows through on their agreement.
And by the way, women are all the same.
Damn, he can't just say that. Some hot takes in this game. With the principal dead, we still need to find the truth behind this school and the US, so there is still more to do. There is a trophy flashing in the room, and by hitting it, I open the shortcut back outside, and that lets me loop through the level more quickly. On the fire escape, Iwazaru tells me that he's worried this is the end and that I shouldn't return to the hotel. He says to learn everything about the boy and reveal the truth. I can also now head to the gymnasium, but it's currently locked. Travis is outside and he tells me that Harmon is linked to this school and I need to enter the gym to learn the truth. So here is where those puzzles I missed earlier come in. I need to find a way to unlock the gymnasium to finish the level. I returned to the start and took a different path this time. I found a data room, and the first thought that I had was I would be able to play the cassettes in here. Inside, I found a control panel that required an odd engraving to access. I also saw these children's drawings on the wall, and the camera was zooming in on them, making me think that they were significant. Lastly, there was this cabinet containing another puzzle requiring a code number. I figured that the posters on the walls were the clue, and I needed to somehow match the 4 symbols here to numbers from the posters. I tried a bunch of different combinations and theories, but couldn't narrow down which symbol meant which poster. I was totally stumped, so I sought out Yun-hun and paid the blood price for a hint. What? Dude, I got mugged! So yeah, no help from this guy either. I then went back into the corridors and just around the corner found 4 more posters. I matched the symbols on these ones to the ones in the cabinet and kids' drawings. So for example, this poster that had an animal robot on it also had the Quetzalcoatl symbol. I looked at the animal poster and saw that there were 6 drawings, so I deduced that the number for that symbol on the cabinet was also 6. Pretty obtuse, and people in chat didn't really get my line of thinking at the time, but a cool puzzle for sure. This opened a secret room and Travis was inside. He gave me the cassette player and told me the tapes would reveal the truth. We're nearly there. We have most of the pieces and just need to start putting them together. We listened through each of the 10 tapes and they detail how an FBI agent was investigating the school and its connection to corruption within the electoral system. He says that the school is actually controlled by Japan and that its students are used to infiltrate the US Congress and control it for Japan's benefit. The tape also holds details about a student called Amir Parkreiner, and each tape has a fact about Amir's past. Chat helped me write all of these facts down as we were going to need them soon. Before I could enter the details in the data room, I still needed an odd engraving to open the control panel. After some exploration, I found a room joined to the principal's one from earlier that only Garcian can enter. There is a panel on the wall that requires 2 codes to open. We had one from the carrier pigeon's note earlier, and the other one came from the tapes. Then there's a fingerprint scanner on the wall that opens for Garcian and reveals a safe. I needed to crack the safe, and there is probably information about the code in the level somewhere. I, on the other hand, just cheesed it by turning 1 notch at a time until I got a noise to confirm I was making progress. I did it! I don't know how, but I did it! Okay, for some reason I had blood on my head and I have an odd engraving. Dude, what the hell is going on? As per usual, more questions are raised than answers. With the odd engraving in hand, I was able to access the control panel, and it asked me 10 questions about Amir Parkreiner that I could answer thanks to listening to the tapes from earlier. With that done, the gymnasium door finally opened and we were nearly done with this beast of a level. Inside the gym, we see this fat guy hanging from a rope and portraits of presumably past principals / presidents above him. I activated the control panel on the wall and the game switched me to Garcian. Matsuka appears and tells me that the hanged man was the US Education Secretary and the true power behind the US elections. They don't clarify who killed him, but we get this exchange.
What is United States? What is the purpose of the president?
I'm Japanese. How the hell should I know? Figure it out yourself. There are more important things. Shit. Like finding out who you are.
I wish I could say answers are coming, but not so much. We get a close-up of some of the previous principals, and one of them seems to be Harmon. With no explanations, we're then sent into what is essentially the final boss battle of the game. Oh my god. What am I supposed to do? Oh, time to make him just swing more and more. This is so dumb. What the fuck, dude? That's the weak spot. This is no doubt one of the strangest games of all time. I figured out they made me Dan so I could use his charge shot to hit the weak point. Now even more confusing, the Secretary drops his golden gun and spawns 7 giant shadow men below him. These shadows slowly walk toward you and cannot be hurt in any way. The golden gun is on the floor, but whichever character you try to interact with it on will get a message saying they cannot handle it. We assumed we needed to be Garcian to pick up the gun, but Garcian can only be switched to in Harmon's room. We concluded this must be a forced death section and just had to let each of our 6 Syndicate members be killed. With each of them now killed, we were forced to swap to Garcian, and as suspected, could now wield the golden gun. Alright, good call.
Son of a bitch.
Okay. And with that, this section came to a close. I'm transported back to Garcian's trailer, left trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Mine and chat's working theory now was that the Killer7 members were all people assassinated 30 years ago at the Union Hotel and were assimilated by Harmon. Still desperate for answers though, it was back to Union Hotel to wrap things up. Garcian is now the only member of the Syndicate seemingly left alive and playable, so we need to navigate the hotel with just him. There are also no longer Heaven Smile to fight, all we can do is return to each of the locations that held soul shells on our last visit. There is now a bloodstain at each location, and interacting with it shows a cutscene of each member of the Killer7 being killed by an unseen individual whistling green sleeves. For Kevin, Con, Mask, Coyote, and Kaide, the cutscenes have no talking and just the continuous whistling. But when we get to the final one with Dan, it's quite different.
So, you must be the one they call the Bloody Heartland. You here to kill the Smiths, is that it? Rule of thumb, don't set your goals too high. What do you want? Who do you want, huh?
You.
That's saying Dan was already part of the Smiths when Garcian killed him. Dude, I feel like I need to like download more brain capacity. I need more brain RAM. So Garcian is the one that killed the Syndicate members in the past, but contrary to what I had thought, they were already Smith Syndicate members when it happened. Still trying to tie it all together, it was time to return to the room on floor 7. We get another cutscene with a mysterious figure from earlier, and he claims to be a younger Harmon Smith. No explanation on how there are multiple Harmons though. He reveals that Garcian Smith was in fact a mere park rhino and went to the school that we just explored as a child. 30 years ago, Amir was hired by the government to assassinate the Smith Syndicate, and at the time, Harmon was one of the 7 and the principal of the school. That safe we found earlier is where Harmon's body was stashed, and the other 6 members were killed at the Union Hotel. Harmon then says he found Amir on the roof that day and saw something special in him before we're kicked out of the room and put back in control. The only thing left to do now was venture onto the roof, which was inaccessible last time I was here. Before we take the stairs to the roof though, we spot an entrance to the forbidden room just like the one in Garcian's trailer.
What took you so long?
Nice view, isn't it?
It's different. Time here is warped.
To finish this game peacefully is my last wish.
Guess that won't happen. We've been interrupted again.
Has another come to surface?
A sight for sore eyes.
Haven't seen you around for a long time.
Come in.
Please.
What is happening? Then up the stairs, we get a cutscene of Garcian seeing the younger version of himself and this happening. He's got the golden gun.
No, it wasn't me. It can't be. It's all a misunderstanding.
So that's all their weapons. So then you weren't bringing them back to life, you were them. Wait, is that it? Now, that's not it just yet. This is a fake out set of credits with the real ones coming after we do an epilogue in the final chapter. Before we head to that, I just want to say that if you are confused at this point, we were too. I have tried my utmost to give you all the context in this video that I had while playing and offer my thoughts on the story, but there's still so much that I couldn't cover, didn't understand, or relies on layers of interpretation and further research. I'm going to show you the remainder of the game. I would like to recommend that if you are left curious about the story or details after this video, there are multiple options I can recommend. First of all would be checking it out for yourself. It's an amazing game. Alternatively, there are videos on YouTube doing deep dives, and even just the Killer7 wiki has tons of information. I'm honestly more confused than ever after doing more research, because this game is deliberately obtuse and extremely heavy on symbolism, but I definitely urge you to look into it more if you fancy it. After the fake out credits, we're brought back to the chapter select screen and see that there is one more chapter added. Chapter 6, Lion. I pinky promise that this one is super short and we're nearly done. I know this game is a behemoth, so if you made it this far, you are a real one. With little preamble, we are now at Battleship Island in the North Pacific. It's more or less a military complex between the US and Japan, and it's now 3 years later. We are Garcian, but he is now wearing a dark suit and has glowing green eyes. There are Heaven Smiles around, but we are not able to scan for them anymore. We can, however, for the first time, kill them while they are invisible. So we needed to keep an ear out for their laughs and look for the outlines to shoot them with the golden gun as we progressed. We eventually found the big Colosseum area that we went through on our way to every boss throughout the game. It seems like both the Forbidden Room and this area don't adhere to time or space and can be in multiple locations at once. Unlike every other time we've been here though, I can now gain access to this blocked staircase. Inside we encounter Kenjiro Matsuka for one last time. He's the leader of the Japanese UN party and the one plotting to avenge Japan on the US.
You boys are almost done. You don't need to go around killing everybody anymore. The last of the Heaven Smiles is in the back. The big boss. If you do him, then it means you've eradicated all of them. No more terrorism. Hail to the free world. But I wonder, what'll become of you guys if terrorism is the law of nature? You know, you should kill me now, because you don't want us hanging around, know what I mean? If I'm alive, I'll give you a run for your money. Even an assassin like yourself. Better be prepared, because blood must atone for blood. So, which will you choose? Your own country? Or watch our retribution? Your fucking decision.
We're offered a choice here to kill or spare him, and the ending is slightly different based on your choice. I did the only sensible thing and left the decision to Twitch chat, but they did what they do best, and they made it a tie. Alright, classic hilarious chat prank. Now we're just gonna have to sit here forever. Good job. Since it was down to me, and he was threatening terrorism and violence, I settled on killing him. This cleared the way to killing the final Heaven Smile. This tunnel somehow connects to Harmon's room, and inside we find a younger Harmon wearing a different suit and seemingly dead on the floor. The door then leads us out into Garcian's home, and this time the vault door leads to a basement rather than the Forbidden Room. Inside we spot what looks like Iwazaru and chase him into a corner. I didn't want to kill our little gimp guy as he's helped me so much during the game, but I gathered he'd been turned into the final Heaven Smile, and I had to do it. Wait, do I have to kill him? Why? Wait, what? I thought this was gonna answer questions, chat. What? So that's the real ending, what? So yeah, that's the real ending. I checked, and sparing Matsuka leads to the Japanese UN Party's forces launching an attack on the US, but no major difference otherwise. Behind these real credits was also one last special cutscene. But yeah, let's see if the post-credits cutscene just illuminates us and makes everything very, very clear, surely. Alright, chat. Shanghai 100 years later. Surely. Now we're Harmon again, so Harmon is back. We're fighting Turquoise Man again. And he's flipping me off or using his weird god hand shit.
You're awake from your nightmare.
Harmon, the world won't change. All it does is turn. Now, let's dance.
Alright, well, that didn't help. The end? Yes, it is the end. Shut up. And that is really, really it. The true end of the game. It seemed that my theory about Harmon and Kunlan being weird eldritch god beings was correct, as they are still battling each other a century after this game. But there were so many other things that I was left baffled by and just had to mull over for several weeks after finishing this one. And that was Killer7. What an amazing acid trip of a game that was. It took me a grand total of 17 hours and 24 minutes to beat. This was by far the toughest but also most enjoyable game of the challenge so far. I settled on an 8 for difficulty, as I want to leave the highest numbers open for something like Ikaruga or F-Zero. This game is a real challenge though, and it put me through my paces a number of times. But 90% of the time it felt fair and really rewarded the growth of the player through knowledge and skill. Enjoyability wise, at the time I also went with an 8, but since then I've actually upped it to a 9. This game was incredible. It was honestly a fantastic experience nearly the whole way through. I've never played anything else quite like it, and I sincerely recommend you give it a go with the enhanced version that's on Steam. If you made it through this mammoth video, thank you very much for sharing this piece of gaming history with me. There's no wheel to show you this week. As per my rules for the challenge, games ending in a 5 are a community choice. I had people in streams play marble races every now and then the 3 winners of those got to each pick a game. They selected Luigi's Mansion, The Simpsons Road Rage, and Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. These 3 were then polled for a week on the YouTube community page, and the winner was Road Rage. After this gargantuan game, I was really pleased to see Road Rage win. We're essentially going from the height of gameplay and narrative complexity to the very other end of the spectrum. But as always, you'll need to come back next week to see how that went. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing as they help the channel grow, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.